Hi guys, welcome to the Internal Bank for Technical Summary Code Films. We made mention that we're going to get to this summary because we need to understand some technical aspects of the application, and not only the application but regards to real life um, practicals or real life scenarios, and how do I use this and why do I need this. And I don't see Java is a little bit abstract and it's more conceptual, so how is the concept becoming a reality? That's why we are here. So we're going to test the application, run it again. We're going to perform some testing, which is more of a UAT testing. After the UAT testing, we also test some part of the web applications um, technologies. That's in terms of Incognito running, in terms of session running, and in terms of cookies. So just a little bit of that. There's more to it. There's a lot more to it. I'm still doubting if I should have the software engineering summary. That's to highlight how object design was used, and object design. What approach did I use? Did I work with a design pattern? Did I build everything from scratch? Did I work with inheritance implementations? Did I work with delegations or aggregations? All those nuts and bolts. I don't know whether I should still have that software engineering summary. Up to now, I still don't know. But the console and file logging is something that has to be touched, because if you're a technical person and, for instance, you are testing a web application, you really work with the console most of the time, and files as well. So that has to be touched. I see that one to be more essential than the software engineering summary. So pardon me if I may not have that software engineering summary, but console and file logging is something that I believe we should really look into. It's more than this. There's also the web server side, web server. More went into ensuring I was able to connect to the database, and also how do I move to different URL, how are the URLs being mapped, is it automatical, is it magical, is it just like that, did the application do that, how did I go about that? All those also has to be preserved also into another code film, either within the software engineering summary or the web application summary or the web development summary. So let's just go right into the technical summary. Let's have a feel of the application and let's look at what we want to do. So let me just, it's more of console and file logging, please. Console and file logging, and any other thing I'll make mention of it along the um, along the video. So let's go into application. Let's run our application. Before that, let me start with the web.xml. Let me just refreshing my the web.xml. What have I kept right here? Web.inf. Okay. Alright, so web.xml is where most of our URL mappings took place. In other words, it was done by Java, not Java, but it was done by the Eclipse IDE. That's when you're configuring your application. Some of you may have to do it by yourself, as in the mapping. Some too can be done by scaffolding. That's when the first time you are building a new project, or you are starting a new project. So it's more of when you are starting a new project. And here we have the connection to the database. That's as a resource, and then as a resource you are making mention of your resource to the database. So we have the employees DB resource, you also have the Bancom resource. All this has to be made mention, because when you come to your web application, that's the starting page. Based on how you have defined it, you have to have some initialization being done, either at your own defined controller. If you define your starting page to be at the controller, fine. If you also define your starting page to be at a index.html, default.jsp, it's all based on your ingenuity. Honestly speaking, that's why um, it's very flexible to work with this, um, but out of that flexibility too, it comes with a lot of headache. When you're trying to do so many things, you have to think a lot. So it's your creativity, it's your own creativity. If you want to start with a console, if you want to start with index or HTML, which most applications all do start with, fine. But when you're done, how are you going to map the servlet? All that's let's leave that alone. Let's focus on run the application. But this is the web.xml. So you see, you appreciate the connections and also the mappings that are taking place before application runs. So before the GSP is the welcome file list. So when you decide that we run application, it's going to start from the default GSP because that's how we've defined it here. It's being mapped here, and then that kind of scaffolding is being done by our Java ID Eclipse. As it starts, it knows how to put everything together. And then we also have our web server too. Our web server too is the container that are going to run our application. So there's a lot that goes into it. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I may be pushed to do the software engineering summary. So I'm still doubting. Come on. Let me just go here and see what changes have been made. I doubt. Still didn't save it. Don't save. Oh. Okay, let me explain this because because we decided to run from the controller, that's why we are having this issue. We haven't initialized our database and other stuffs that's with regards to the log writing. So we have to make sure that we run from the default.jsp, not from our controller, because our servlet has not been initialized. So let's don't run from here anymore. Let's start again. It's supposed to run from default.jsp. Alright, so we're running from default.jsp, not from controller. So you can see it's default.jsp, and I explained that it's being recognized because of the web.xml mapping that has been done here. This is the default.xml, default.jsp, and so the web.xml is handling that scaffolding for you. And yeah, just soup that for now. Okay, so let's move to our browser and start our console. So this is our console. So good. Let's pull this out because this is going to be cover the bulk of the work we want to do today. Detach it and let it be on its own. Okay, so if you are to be working in a I don't know, wherever you find yourself, whether it's a software engineering firm or a bank or any corporate office where they use a lot of softwares. I know financial institutions do use a lot of software, so technical people mostly have to face consoles when the need arises, especially when you're testing applications. So you can see that our consoles, first of all, our web server was started. It tells you the server version name, and other details, the JVM that was being used. Don't worry about that. What we are going to look at is more of our database and our web application consoles, the feedback we're getting from the database, the feedback we're getting from the application. So you realize that when we couldn't start the application because we're not running from web default JSP, but from our controller, it shows a null pointer exception because some initialization wasn't done when the application started. All this is a servlet. Servlet goes through a certain life cycle. Okay, so when we resolve that, you realize that it starts with logger init, app file, app log file, and then the date. So what does this mean? Let's go to our web browser now. Please stick with me with this as much as possible. It's technical, but I know you understand it. It's not any rocket science. Alright, so you realize that when we pass the URL to the tab, it writes to the console saying, giving out certain information, and that information or what is printing out is based on what the developer wrote when he was developing the application. So based on the developer's understanding of the application, that's the same way the console will respond. If the developer says that when the application starts, it should write to a file, it does that upon initialization. So and it also, so this one is the file that the application the logs have started writing to, and it comes back again and tells you where the location of the logs are. Then later on, it tells you that before you logged in, cookies were deleted, and it also makes mention of writing to the cookies deleted, writing to the log file. Why is this so? The reason is that you want to be able to have a footprint of everything that's happening in the application. If you don't have logs of such, in fact, the application crashes right now, and the developers they've developed the app already, it's live, people are using it, but it crashes. We can't go into the source code at that moment. We need the logs files to know what's happening in the application, what's the problem. So it's more of best practice to have logs, and so that you know what your application is going through, the whole life cycle of the application. So based on how the logs should be created, that's how the logs will respond. So our console log always starts when you start a new session. Based on the business logic, we'll have a new log file being created. So that's what's happening every time the application starts from scratch. So if you realize that if we run this again in another tab, if we copy the URL and we send it to a new tab, we realize that our console will make mention of cookies being deleted because we don't have to have any previous state being defined by the application. So it comes back again and tells you cookies was deleted and the time. So how do you know which log we have to look to and which file contains the information that we need? So first of all, it gives you the number and then the time that you occurred. So this almost a minute to 8 to 6. So you can realize that that's the current log that we're looking at, and this is the current information that is being written to, and it tells you that we're in the default.jsp view. So let's log in now. I'll definitely show you where the logs are being written to. Okay, so you realize that when we log in now, it spits out the database has been initialized. So log export. So the database has been initialized. JDBC employees DP has been referenced successfully. So our database is also up. There's nothing wrong with our database. And also it shows you what kind of HTTP method was initiated during the login. That was a do post method, and it writes that to the log file, and it tells you who was trying to access it. It tells you it was a teller that was trying to access the application. That's the user role. We can also pass the name. It also tells you that the JDBC for the Bankum customers also has been initialized. It has a do post for that, and then it writes also to the JDB customer DB session set. So this one is setting the session for customers inquiry. That's withdrawals. We are doing that during initialization. So let's continue to walk through the application. So when we move to withdrawals, it keeps logging. Now it makes mention of the current page we are in. That's our JSP. We are in now at the layout teller withdrawal view page. So it has been launched. That's why it's in blue. So anything in blue is more of the location of the JSP. That's the name of the JSP or the action that's taking place within our web application. Anything in green is more of the HTTP process or the live process of the application. So blue is for information about the web application pages and which one has been launched, where are we. The green is more of the HTTP request that is happening during those processes, and the serverless technologies is in the initialization, is a do post, and the white is writing just to the logs. That's the console. We are writing to the console in white. So anything in white is console login. Anything in green is more of the HTTP methods. So different colors to know which one is in success, which one is in failure, which one is also for processing of the web application in terms of its life cycle. So let's query a name. Good. Now it continues and tells you that the fraud log file has now started, and this is the time it has started, and then the date, and it tells you the location, and it tells you that you are now having a bank details query. So write is an action bank details query, the account number that was passed, and then we find out that the customer DB connection was successful. So that's why we're able to query the database. And it tells you the information or the payload, the data that was requested from the database. And if we proceed, it goes on and prints more information that we're writing is a withdrawal process that has been initiated, the count, the units, everything is being logged, and also the number of fraud cases. This is the first fraud case. So the yellow is telling you more of the bank, the withdrawal activities. So the yellow logs for withdrawal activities. And then we go back. Now let's see where our logs located. So we're going to log out. Once we log out, our log will be closed, and we can now start investigating or look into our log files. So now let's go and locate our log files so that we can do some technical stuff there too as well. So it's located in the log. Remember, the path is being shown here. Web content log documents. So document, report events, web content log, and we have a lot of logs, a lot of logs. So we're going to first of all sort let's group them by date modified first, today's one, and that was yesterday's one, other logs. So you realize that our logs have different timestamps, and some also have data, some don't have data. So you may ask yourself, why is some having data and some is not having data? And the reason being that during the life cycle of the application, the logs are being generated as to a timestamp reference. And the reason is that you don't want to write all your logs into one file as a one lengthy log file for just one timestamp. It's not really it's not the best as of this application, because we don't want to have just one log file for the whole state. We want to know as and when something occurred. We wrote to our log file, we wrote some technical stuff to our log file. It's not as and when the whole application started. If the system crashes right now, a log file will be generated. It has to have a log. If the process started successfully, there should be a log file. So you search through your log files and find the one with the information. If you didn't write anything into the log file, meaning during that time that was running, another log file was started because of a different timestamp or a different activity that took place. So the log file for the first one wasn't closed, it was open, and a new file was created. And someone said, why didn't you close it? And the reason is that as of that time that I developed this, I didn't have in mind of using concurrency or Java concurrency, the more advanced stuff. I just worked with what I knew to make sure I get logs at different timestamps. So let's first of all investigate with the one with data, and let's see, does it contain everything we need? That's the first thing. So we start with this one. So this one makes mention of 5:59:06. Default JSP was launched, database was initialized, JDBC. It writes everything to you and it tells you that we went to the layout teller view was launched. So this our log file. It first gives you the timestamp, the date and the time. It gives you information. Let me magnify this a bit. Yeah. It gives you the life cycle information. There's an information for you, and the information is when we launched the default.jsp, the cookies were deleted before login. Initialization init is a method within our servlet, so our controller, and then when the servlet lifecycle started, database were initialized, JDBC was referenced, that's for the employees DB, Bancom database was also referenced, and then do post took place when you are logging in. That's the login request was a teller, and for that login request we set the Bancom session, and the reason was that we will need that information when we are doing querying. So we set the session straight from initialization during the do post, because if you now had access, you wouldn't want to have your connections all over the place. So you as and when you need it, then you use it based on how the application has to be designed. And another info is that now we are now at the layout teller withdrawal view, and layout teller withdrawal view was launched. So that's also another information for you. Okay, so one was this for our application, that's the app log file. All right, then let's look at our frog log file. Let's see what we also have there. So our frog log file tells you the action that was taking place, bank details query, the customer that's the payload, the information that we need to know was the customer DB session was successful, and it gives you the withdrawal process and also the number of fraud cases, and then tells you what happened during the do get process, that's the logout request, delete cookies, and other information that we need, that's during our logout, because logout was a get request. We had to go and call the logout during the teller's action, because everything was being contained in the within our controller. So it was using more of not purely MVC, but it's a loosely MVC architecture model for this application. So everything had to go to our controller. That's why I had the do get, and then the cookies were deleted successfully. So this is a log file for just that action that we had initially. The first, from this app log file to this one, there was no much activity wasn't written, because we didn't remember, our system crashed and we didn't even log into the application. So we realized that there was nothing inside the application. There's no information, no content, no data inside this app log file because of how we started it. So based on where the data is located, that's where you start tracing and which time. Okay, now if our system crashes too, we can also add that to our log file. That's doing exceptions, and we can also write that to our app log file, so that one too can also be implemented. So this is just to tell you that we have our console is generating logs, is displaying logs to you for your testing process. And also we also have a copy offline in our directory, whereby we have the app log files, and we also have fraud log files. Several log files can be generated from this. We can also have our what do you call it, the teller action log file, just to know why the teller took so long in doing so many processes. I think I'm talking too much. Finally, this is what we're going to do. We're going to now run our application on incognito mode. So we also have a different view of the logs from scratch. No empty logs files. Alright, so let's do that now too. So let's stop our server. And let's start it again. Alright, so we're starting afresh. And realize that our logs have now started with what? This number 0. And it's starting at this time. So most of the activities that we will have now will be written to this log file for this particular time, because we've now started the application. Let's copy this to incognito. You see, if we send it now to incognito, so another request is going to be made to the server, another get request. New incognito window. There's another get request is going to be made to the server, so a new log file will start for that particular time. We won't write to an old log file because this is a new activity. So this is a new activity as well. So we have a new log file that is being generated. So our current log file is log file number 2. That'll be our current log file. Because incognito is also a different browsing mode altogether. But if I had taken it from before incognito, I had taken it to, let's take it to a new web application and a new different browser. Let's run it here. A new log file is being generated. So the log file is being generated as and when an activity is taking place. It's a get request. So during initialization, a new log file will be generated. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but there's a bug, but just stick with me. Yeah, so that's how it was designed. Probably I'll have to look also into it, but it's not as timestamp based. It's a timestamp based log. So let's work with the incognito because I made mention that that's what I'm going to work with. Let's log in now. So that's log file number 5, and all this data has been written. So our database has been initialized. We have been able to reference our JDBC, and the customer DB has been referenced. Now let's cause an error to, or let's trigger a different log constraint, because it's not every time everything will be successful. So let's now go into our web.xml and let's stretch out, and let's cause an error over here. Let's say, in our database is customer DB. Let's do DCVD, and that's because in our previous video we made mention of the databases we're using and how we query our databases. So unless you watch a previous video, but I'll still start up the workbench for us. Okay, because I saved it now, you see our server is running. So any new activity, it starts, the life cycle starts again. That's the servlet life cycle starts all over again. Wow, this is interesting. So our destroy method was called. It's all part of the servlet life cycle. Okay, so we've caused a change in our resource. We are no longer coordinating to call employees DB, but employees DB and some other characters. If we save it again, whereas a new context also be started. Alright, so okay, this link, let's add, it's not different from the rest too. Let's run it now. Incognito mode. Okay, so let's try and log in now to our database. It doesn't make mention of, it doesn't write any logs for our database or what action. It just tells you the page that was activated. That's the information. I have so many browsers open, I'm getting lost. Right. Now let's try and query and see the feedback will get. Our application crashes because let's try and figure out why this is occurring. We are not able to get a connection, and it says that customer DS is null. I think I lost track of the process where I was working. Alright, so let's start again. Let's close everything. And let's start again. All right. Let's copy this to Chrome. Let's log in. Still being able to reference successfully. This is not supposed to be so because we've caused changes in our web.xml. Yeah. Okay, let's rather use a context.xml. There's something about web.xml and context.xml in terms of which one should override which during some startup process. So that's also technical. I wouldn't want to go there, but let's cause the changes here rather. The database you are connecting to. Let's cause those changes here rather. And let's start again. Let's start our application. Yeah, so this one just generated one log file for us, not like the other one that generates like two. Sometimes there's a caching that goes on. You know, our web application and Eclipse ID. Good. So now it writes that unable to connect to what database. It says that write JDBC Bancom reference successfully. It still is able to reference this, but it throws an exception that unknown database Eclipse employees DBSDS and unable to connect to the database. So, and that's coming from our server.xml. So our context.xml. So it's showing this to you that this is the database it's trying to connect to. Yeah, with referencing to the web.xml, there's a code film for that. I did a code film about this the JNDI fix. Sometimes web.xml and context.xml, one of them can, in quotes, override the other. It's more technical than this, but it does okay. I'm aware of that. It does okay. So let's look into our log file. And so with this, we can't do anything in our application. So if you try again to log in, it crashes. The stream has been closed. So because our file has been closed when the exception was thrown. So let's go and investigate inside our logs and find out whether the issue was logged. So we refresh, and then this is our current log file. So it does write out unable to connect to the database and the JDBC Bancom was referenced successfully. You can also make it more explicit by actually writing the database was trying to connect to. So let's look into that as well. The exception that was thrown. Let's write that inside which was inside our do post method. Unable to connect to the database. Let's add the exception as well. Plus e dot get course. So now it will write the whole exception as well, not just reference assessment. Let's run it again and try. Oh, we didn't have our connections. Okay. Yeah, that's because we haven't initialized our buffered writer. Our buffered writer is pointing to null. There is no object pointing to it. This also have to be handled, otherwise during live to be a big issue. So it now writes the exception as well to our logs, and our log file has been closed. So if we come here now, we have our new logs. It tells you other details. Unknown database. So this one was also been written to a log file. And also let's look at how cookies are working. This is very technical. Very technical. Let's revert back to our initial database. This is the same with the web.xml. Let's work with something we all know. And let's turn off cookies. And let's see how cookies are working within our web application. So let's stop this. Run this again. Save. Next. Finish. Okay. As usual, let's go and run it in Chrome. Okay, so now you see everything is working now. Now let's test cookies. The cookies are working. So this is where we are located at this point in time t. This is the page we are on. That's the dashboard page. If I'm to copy this and send it to another page, will our page still be alive, or it will be dead? It's going to be alive because we are using cookies. You understand? The cookies have been set. So it tells that cookies were deleted before login, but once you log in, your cookies has been set. Yeah. Now let's move it to a new window. Let's create a new window. No incognito. So this, we're having a different session, and we are passing the same page but in a different window in a new session. It should throw you back to the home page because such a process is allowed. Well, because the new window. So and the reason is because cookies has been set. That's the reason cookies has been set. So the cookies has an application state. It's not a session state for this application. And finally, to run it, but if you send it into a new incognito window, realize that this won't work. It throws you back to the default home page. That's because cookies are now null. Null cookies has been detected. And because you don't want the web application URL to be able to move into a new incognito window, and you're going to the same process. A new incognito browsing is a different whole browsing mode altogether. But with cookies, it exists within the whole application's life cycle. That's why before you log into various web applications or even some websites you visit, they say accept all cookies. Once you say accept all cookies, it's being saved in your browser, and your browser has all your cookies. So if you are to investigate, that's if we are to call our inspect within our web browser, and go to and move to networks. Let's refresh this again, get new activity. You realize that we can actually locate the cookies information. So this is our cookie, and this is the name of the first name cookie, the last name cookie, and the user role cookie is being saved in our browser. So it came as a request here, and these are being saved in our browser, and it tells you the user agent, that's the browser that was processing it. And we can move this one to a different URL and realize that still our cookies exist within our web application. If we are to clear our cookies right now, you realize that we lose the state of the application. So the cookies is helping you to save the username and the user role, and just these two for the whole application state. Alright, so let's see if that one was also written to our file. Let's refresh this. It wasn't written because our file is still open, because we are just moving between applications. But when it triggered the null state cookies, it moved to our default.jsp. So that one alone should have a state on it. So let's investigate. Oh, so that one wasn't logged. Our null state cookie wasn't logged. Let's find out more. When do we have the null state cookies? That was in 2. So in other words, when we had our null state cookies, our stream wasn't closed. So I think that's within our dashboard view, our stream wasn't closed. So if our stream was closed, our cookies would have written that as well. Yeah, our stream wasn't closed. That's the reason. Our stream wasn't closed. If once was closed, such a thing wouldn't have occurred. Let's try again. Let's move this to a different browser. And it gives our null state cookies. So let's investigate and find what was written to our logs. And that's just recently. So if we open this, right, null state cookies was detected. So that was written to our logs. So yeah, that's it for this cool film. I'm sorry if I struggled along the line to explain this technical stuff, but forgive me for that. I'll try my best to be more clear and concise with my presentation. But I hope you just enjoyed what was done, or you got something from it. If you didn't, don't worry, drop everything in the comment section. Let's hear your thoughts on this cool film. And if you have any questions, to feel free. I'm still contemplating if I should have the web application summary. I'm still contemplating, but in a nutshell, you need console login during testing, so you understand what your application is going through. So you can have different logs. You can have an app log. You can have a fraud logs. You can have different logs. Even when integrations come in, you are going to have an integration logs. so that if anything happens within the application, the log should be able to tell you what's wrong with the application or where there's a fault. And that's being done you based on your own creativity. Sometimes you may have to write your own logs, your own logger from scratch. Sometimes you can use belt or um, what do you call this word? If they are, I've just forgotten. If software has been written for logs already, libraries, sorry, if there are libraries for logs, you can also use it. But in as much as possible, try to be able to write your own logs so that if the use case changes, you don't get stuck or you can't implement a log. Thank you so much for sticking with me with this cool film. With despite the technical expression, verbosity, I apologize. Thank you.